Okay, we're going to talk about democracy today. The question is, why democracy? What is democracy? When does it matter? Who does it matter to? And where does it matter? So all of the questions. I think there's a lot of basic questions that just aren't asked. And so we're going to go down to the roots and we're going to try to answer some of these questions, at least from a logic point of view. This is just analysis of what actually is. It's not a discussion about the philosophy of why something should be. It's more of analysis of reality, what things actually are right now. Because that gets distorted. It gets distorted a lot. So today we're going to talk about a couple of different things to try to get to the root of that problem. The why democracy and the what are really important. Those two things are, they get lost in our education system, in the complexity of what they are. And so I think the best way to look at some of these problems is we're going to take a couple of really big steps back. We're going to do this because it's easier to see really big things, like what democracy is, when you take a step back. And it's like standing in front of something like a painting or in front of maybe a mountain. And if you take a few steps back, or a lot of steps back in a mountain's case, all the details start to disappear because you can't really see them anymore. But you get to see the bigger picture. And painting's the same thing. When you pull back, some paintings are really big, and that's the reason why, because you're supposed to stand farther back to be able to see all the things that are inside of it. So that's what we're going to do right now. We're going to pull back from the mountain that is democracy so that we can see what it is. Now, how to get to the bottom of these things, we're going to go through a logic chain. Now, this logic chain might not be how everybody thinks. So just join me for this ride, because it's a good way to get through some problems. Not all of them, and I'm sure there's other people who can add in the comments different ways to go through these same scenarios. So the logic in this is to simplify things until you understand it absolutely. So you have to be able to answer the question, why and what. So why democracy and what democracy are actually encompasses much deeper things than people are used to attaching to something that is, in a lot of people's eyes, as frivolous as politics. So why democracy and what it is are attached to our history as people. And you see that there's been a change towards democracy, a pull towards it. Now, I've taken a couple of extra steps in my thought kind of train, I guess you could call it, because I've been thinking about this stuff for a very long time. And one of the things that I did, an exercise that I did, was to try to figure out what the different functions are of things in society to society. Why does it exist? And democracy came up as one of the backbone things. So we can get into that right now. It seems like we've had moments of going forward, it feels like, in society, and then pulling back, it feels like, in society. And so those words we're going to talk about, because those feelings that we get are part of the organism that is the body. So I get feelings for a reason, and the feelings come from something. You could ask a person who understands the inside of the body, and they can tell you the chemicals that might happen or the things that are happening inside of your body that actually make feelings. It's pretty cool stuff. So there's a reason why that exists, why your body made it, why it has entire structures built around that, creating a feeling. And so then when you look at things and you get a feeling about something, those feelings have a reason for being there. And so fear has a reason for being there. Joy has a reason for being there. We have these very, very strong feelings for things because our body is reacting to something for a reason. Now, I see society and the history of society easier to look at if you kind of look at it like your body. So let's put that together. We're going to put our body, my body, your body, and try to imagine society like that. So in my lifetime, I've aged and I've grown older, and my body's gotten bigger and stronger and hopefully smarter. And the things inside of my body have been growing up, and they have structures inside of them and reasons for doing things. Like my bones are there for a reason, to hold me up and to give the muscles something to pull against. And democracy in society is very similar to that, in the sense that it serves a function. Now, it took a long time for democracy to really start to change the structure of how society is coming together. It was always pushing towards democracy. But in the last several, it's hard to say because history is measured by the people who think those moments are the most important. And so as a person who looks back and maybe studies democracy, they might be excited about moments in history where certain laws were passed that gave people rights. That's kind of the baseline of what democracy is. Now, to go back to what I was just talking about, the feelings and how they're part of the body. The things that we push for and fight for, really, really fight for in our society, are things that make us feel good. They feel right. We don't tend to fight for things that feel wrong. And if we are fighting for things that feel wrong, it becomes a quagmire. Well, it becomes a real mess very fast. So, I gotta readjust my thoughts. The good feelings that we have inside of our body are supposed to direct us towards something. So let's go back to that what, why thing. Good feelings direct us towards things that are going to make us live. Bad feelings direct us towards, or direct us away, hopefully, from things that will hurt us. In the short term, it can be a little action. Burning your hand on the stove. It can be lying to a friend. It can be lying to yourself even. Those are things that you feel inside of you that aren't really quite right. And that's because those things do damage. You damage your skin when you touch something too hot, and you damage the fabric that holds things together when you lie, because relationships are built on the trust in that communication is honest, that things are being told that are real, so that a network of thought can be extended outwards. Anytime you throw a liar into there, it's breaking up that network of knowledge that is actually something. We're going to talk about what that knowledge is. So the idea of democracy is based on the direction of giving individuals the rights and the freedoms to live. And good feelings are based on and direct us towards trying to extend our life and our children's lives. So lots and lots of things come down to this. This is probably the most important function of our rules, our rule-based society. And that's to extend our lives and to provide a better life for our children. Now, most good feelings that we have actually direct us towards that. They are trying to extend the lives of ourselves and the lives of our children. And a democracy, the idea of somebody having the rights to be able to choose their future, to be able to protect the lives of themselves and of their children, is the root of the idea. Now, any living thing is going to do this. If I have a plant, it's going to do this too. So we're going to compare all the living things together. I compared the society to a body, and we can also compare it to another living thing. Let's take another easy thing, a plant. If you give a plant water, and you give it sunlight, and you give it the right nutrients, and you don't harm it, then the plant is going to grow. It's going to produce offspring. It can produce fruit. So these are different things that happen, that we see when life is successful. We see successful life in examples around us all the time. We see successful people growing up. We see successful, like growing up from being just a few cells to growing up into a running, talking, playing child. That's considered success. So we are looking at democracy, and we're looking at the society kind of like the body, and the democracy is just the feelings that and the direction that we're going with the body that allows it to grow and thrive. So democracy is kind of like one of the parts. If you were to be feeding a plant, it would be the sunlight, or it would be the nutrients, or the environment that it's in. If you take those things away, slowly you're going to watch the plant die, or it will stop growing, or it won't produce fruit like it's supposed to, or vegetables. It might not reproduce because it's not strong enough to do that. And society is like that too. Society is very much a living thing, and it reacts very much to its environmental things that it's put through. And through these steps of logic, we can look at the things that are going on in society right now, and we can see them for what they are in reality. Not an opinion on what it is, but for what it actually represents. So when we talk about voting for democracy, or when a country takes democratic steps, what they're doing is they're taking steps to protect their people and their people's ability to live longer lives, and for their children to be able to choose the types of protection they need, that they want for their own children. Doesn't always have to be choice. There will be a point where some of these systems that we're working through are boiled down to what works best, and then we don't need choice anymore. We've realized that something works. We've realized that latrine pits don't work. Peeing in a trench and throwing your waste in a trench right next to the house doesn't work. We know this. We've watched disease spread this way. We've watched children fall into these things and die. It's been a whole history of why you don't do that. So that's why we have modern day sewage, and we wouldn't choose latrine pits again because of that. Even though we're a democratic state world, we don't choose to do things that we know damage us. That's growth. That's like me growing from being a small little tiny baby to being a full-grown adult. It's my body, as it moved forward in time, it learned these things that make it not make those decisions. I don't put my hand on a hot stove. I don't put my hand in the way of a knife when I'm using it. And that's because time has passed and I've learned things. And so if we look at society as not just today and what's happening right now, and we actually look at it as the body of society, as the timeline of society, like I would my own life, then I can see that it's very much a living thing, that it reacts like a living thing, and I can go back in depth into how we can use the things that are living around us to see the functions in our own society and to be able to predict behavior, to be able to predict direction, and to be able to understand what human beings are. There's kind of a thing that people have been saying over the last few years, that human beings are a virus on this planet. And it's not true. It is absolutely not true that human beings are a virus on this planet. We're much more complicated than that. Much more powerful than a virus is, in the sense that we consciously make choices. So a virus, in the sense that we understand it right now, is not going to build an arena or a cathedral or a mile-high tower. But people are capable of doing those things because we make choices and we learn how to do things. So it's a very different analysis. I'll go into that another time. I can make an entire video about how I see what people are compared to what I've heard people compared to. So let's move along to the democracy thing. Let's get into the when, because right now we're seeing some things that are happening, and I would love to be able to connect the very current events that are happening to this idea, so that kind of we understand what's going on when we hear something like Taiwan voted for democracy. They have their third governing or presidential election that put a leader in place who's pro-democracy. And why does that matter? It matters because that country has chosen to protect its people and their right to live and their right to choose, which are connected to that good feeling. The very root of what we've been trying to design a society from the very start. The difference between being an animal and the difference between being a society is the rules that protect each other from another person's opinion of what should be. And we do this to protect our kids. Maybe it's in my best interest and my thoughts to not want my kids to come to any harm. But maybe it's somebody else's thoughts and opinions that my kids should be put into direct harm. And that's where we have to make choices that are rigid, that are unbreakable. And when you look at our laws and our legal system and the things that shock us the most, that hurt us the most inside when we're looking at it and we watch something on TV, it's related to children and reproduction. You talk about our children, you talk about what people are doing to them or what they could do to them. That's the bottom. That's the what you would call the root of evil. The very pit of evil is doing things to children, because that is the break in the chain where you can't pass on your knowledge, you can't pass on your genetics, you can't pass on your species, you can't pass on your flowers, whatever it is. If you're a living thing, it's that break where it's death. So democracy is not it's not a light topic. It's something that happens to prevent death of a group of people. Now, one of the curious things that I had come across, I don't know the exact source of the study, but I was wondering, how does complex life come from single bits of life? To me, that seemed pretty important into understanding why people come together versus splitting apart. Why cities are a trending thing versus everybody trying to get an equal space between us. And there's a wonderful study done where a scientist put a type of algae, single-celled algae, into a petri dish with a predator. There was another animal in there that would eat the algae. And the algae tended to group together, and it would create these circles. Now, this stuff can get, there's whole legs of science and mathematics that analyze why things exist or why things do things in the direction that they do mathematically. And so it makes sense when you make a circle and you pile a whole bunch of stuff inside of it, that it is going to give a survival chance to all of the things. Not every single one of them is like the ones on the outside are still going to die, but the chances of all of them dying is reduced. And the ones who have the strongest instinct to group towards the center are the ones that tend to survive. And so because there's this bias, that will keep on happening. They will keep on grouping. And then as they group for longer and longer and longer, maybe they'll make a wall. And then maybe they'll make specific jobs for individuals on the inside to make sure that the wall is kept up and that the things on the inside can keep reproducing and living longer lives and reproducing and living longer lives. So it really does get basic. And this is again pulling all the way back away from all of the nuances that people have that describe their behaviors. There are some people who can describe the layers of society in very specific ways based on their own studies or their own lives that they've led. And I'm just pretty good at pulling back because that's where my thoughts pulled, as I was always pulling back to see what a bigger picture, how they all work together. So there's other countries other than Taiwan who are working right now for their democracy. Probably the biggest battle in the world right now for democracy is in the United States. It's not being touted like that. Well, actually, just recently, it's started to pick up the pace, and the language around it has changed to a fight for democracy, because that's what it's been. The U.S. has been under attack since, I don't actually know. I can't give hard numbers on that, but at least since the beginning of the Trump presidential election, when there was election interference. So those are really serious things. And when you look at the source of election interference into a democratic nation, and you use the tools of logic that we've just gone through, it really puts a big circle on what something is. So going back to our why, what, when. A lot of the disinformation is coming from Russia, and people aren't getting out quite how important that is. When you have countries that have actual bot farms that create disinformation, they have places that just their full-time job is to sit at computers and to create chaos and havoc and to break real information, to lie professionally. There's a reason why they're doing it. They're doing it because democracy is something, and it functions with a purpose. So they're attacking it. They're attacking it because it's strong. You don't attack something and spend your entire lifetime's energy towards trying to destroy something unless you really believe it's worth destroying. And so democracy for these people is worth destroying because it's a threat to them. Democracy has always been a threat because it's a real thing. It holds power. When everybody is democratically aligned and everybody has rights and everybody is willing to protect those rights, it is so powerful. It is so powerful, which is very, very easy to see. Very easy to see why dictators and authoritarians will attack it at every chance they can. And so the U.S. has been under attack for a very long time with the misinformation campaigns. What used to be the rags magazines on the side of the aisle when you're getting groceries turned into mainstream news. And it's all done for a reason. There's a handful of actors who are doing it for a reason. One of them is, one of the reasons would be to cover up things that are actually going on. So if you put a sensational story next to something that's actually happening, people are less likely to believe the one that's actually happening. So that goes over and over and over again. Flood the media space with sensational garbage, and then when real news comes out, people aren't really likely going to react to it or see it or even notice it because the media space has been flooded. We've got mainstream media allowing their media space to be flooded with this. It's basically toxic sludge to something that's real, information space, something that we own as the West, something that is our right, that we have a right to honest media space where people are not maliciously trying to change the fabric of our society through lies. So that's why when you're looking at something like the attacks on democracy, those are what the actual attacks are. That is what we should be looking out for, and what we should be calling as and treating like an attack. So if an attack happened on a military base, we would call it an attack. We would say a weapon was used and it followed this path and it struck this target and it did this damage and we're going to react in this way. But we're not looking at these things like attacks because we haven't recognized a lot of these things as they are. Like we haven't recognized the body of democracy as a physical thing. So when it's being attacked, we can't say that a weapon was used against something. But its reality is that our society is actually something. It is something that that reacts like a body. It has a self-defense system. It's got cells inside of it that work for or will create defensive structures on the inside. That analogy actually goes really deep. Like we've got police and military that act like the white blood cells of our body. So the other big one is Ukraine. Ukraine happens to be right next door to the most toxic nation for trying to break up rules and structure because it suits their purpose. They're basically, there's more control for them in chaos. They don't understand democracy, and so they keep on trying to tear it apart. And their system is a lesser system. It is an incompatible and lesser system than what democracy is. And They have to spend all of their energy to fight it. Whereas democracy can kind of just chug along, and then every once in a while it's like, oh my God, I'm under attack. And then you shovel them off. Big difference between the power of a living thing that is functioning the way it's supposed to versus something that's been contorted and squeezed in a way that it's not healthy anymore to serve the purpose of something else. In the other living world, the organism world, where there's plants and animals, we call those parasites. Or in the living world, we could call that like a straitjacket, somebody getting straitjacketed. It's really hard to move and to do things when you're in a straitjacket. And some societies around the world have been straitjacketed in that way. So instead of being given democracy, where the body of democracy can run and play and learn and do things, instead, a lot of these societies have been straitjacketed by somebody who would rather use that body for something else. Usually it's just wealth. It's almost all the time it's wealth. We can get into that on another subject. What is wealth and what does it represent inside of this human body? A teaser for that. It's the metabolism. It's the exchange of energy. So democracy those are the biggest circles on the map. I would put the highlights around Taiwan, the US, and Ukraine today, because that's kind of the hot spots. But what democracy is it's the body, and it's always under attack. I don't have the flu right now. I don't have the cold right now. I'm not sick right now. But I have all of these things in me, or I go to places like grocery stores or other places where these things are, and I touch things, and my body's always under attack from those viruses. If I weaken my immune system, or I allow my immune system to become weakened, or a virus is deliberately trying to weaken my immune system to get into me, then I become sick and I react. The democratic body and the democratic group of the West is like that. We are not all actively creating a military force, which is why these non-democratic nations take democratic nations for weak, is because they see us not building a military in our democracy. So they think I idolize military strength as what strength is. They don't understand what life is. They don't understand. They're operators in death. They're not operators in life. And they don't understand how much more powerful life is. Life comes before death. You cannot have a rotting corpse without life. You cannot feed the mushrooms and all of the microbes without life. You have to have life first. It's why it's the more powerful thing. It's why there's good feelings attached to trying to lengthen life and to try to make a safe space for our children to have lives. So we've gone through a lot. How feelings are real, how they're connected to physical things within the body that are built to give us reactions to real things in the world. I've talked about what democracy is and why good feelings can be attached to democracy. Actually, religion sits in that same category. The core of religion is also built on good feelings and morals. We call our morals, the things that make us feel good, morals. We talk about moral strength as somebody who's able to do things that are good for society. Somebody who's got poor moral strength does not do things that are good for society. They do things that are only good for short need pleasures for themselves. Actually, you can compare that to society as well. Like, it's easy for societies to gulp down garbage like a soft drink, even though it's not good for them. They like it. Like, watching Donald Trump news is like soda. It's garbage. It's going to damage you over time. But people do it because it's sensational. So on that note, I kind of want to end this because I can go on a lot of topics for a long time. So it's a good time to break this off. And then if anybody watches this and wants to talk about any one of those different pieces, I am willing to break this up and go a little bit further in. All right. Thanks very much. Goodbye.